Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Venkatesh Varela, an associate professor at OP Chandra Global University. And I'm honored to be your host for today's Design Leadership webinar series hosted by Jindal School of Design and Architecture, OP Chandra Global University, an Institute of Eminence institution. Today's topic for the webinar is a design process in the age of AI 2.0. Before we dive into the insightful session we have planned, let me introduce the panelists for today. We are honored to have with us one of the founding members of the Career Reactor Expected Foundation, Professor of Practice at OP Jindal Global University, Professor Prasad Kantamaneni. With over 25 years of experience, he has built, trained, and mentored high-performance teams, design teams across the globe. He has worked with the world's best, such as Yahoo, Honeywell, VMware, and LinkedIn, to mention a few. And he is an alumni of Harvard Business School. Over to you, Professor Prasad.
Thank you, Professor Venkatesh. Um, so are we going to share the screen? Awesome. Today we are going to be talking about AI 2.0. We've already gone through multiple iterations of AI. The first iteration being just simple chat GPT where you could put in prompts and, we all shared prompts on LinkedIn and other forums, and then we copied and pasted them. So that was the first iteration of AI. The next iteration of AI came when you could train the AI to think like you to a certain extent, and now we are in the space of agentic AI. And so we've also been looking at how UX has been evolving through all of this. So we have with us Bhaskar, who's a senior product designer with TriNet. Um, he's also a mentor and instructor with the Foundation for Experience Transformation and Design. He's also an active participant within the master's degree program. He also collaborates with us on a lot of those areas. So I would love to have Bhaskar present to us in terms of how UX has evolved as we've moved from AI 0.0 to now 2.0, and then walk us through your thought process, Bhaskar. And then once that is done, we will spend a little bit of time very quickly reflecting on, once we see the changes, we'd want to spend a little time reflecting on what that means for us and our profession and what we need to do to keep moving forward and growing and being relevant within the landscape that we are in. Go ahead, Bhaskar.
Thank you, Prasad. Hello, everyone. So today we'll be discussing about how, again, as Professor Prasad mentioned, so what are these possibilities, unseen possibilities, which are happening? And uh, let's start with a challenge. Let's take a minute and let's start with a challenge. But before that, what I want to talk about is earlier, few years ago, if there was any event which has been happening, like any of like a war or a conflict or anything like a natural disaster, it would take some time for the news to reach to us. But now, right now, in this area, in this arena, everything is public and we can get all the news very instantly via probably social media or news or even everywhere. So we can get those information on our fingertips, on our mobile, or even on our laptops. So everything is public in real time. So that brings a thought where, like, if we just look at the challenge. So here is the challenge, and I want to uh, have you to look at this for a couple of minutes, and then just one question is that curious question is that how much time would this actually take for us to implement? You can put on your thoughts on the chat. We will just look at it.
So the challenge here is to create some sort of a intelligence dashboard for a war analyst using all the publicly available information to track the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. And so essentially, I'm okay. Oh, you say we got to pull from satellite imagery, social media, news wires, field reports. You also want to see force. Oh, you want this in real time. Map supply chain disruptions, talk about how the conflict is progressing in the 30, 60, and 90 days. And you want to be able to filter by faction, including state and non-state actors, and produce daily briefings for senior defense leadership. All right. If you guys can put it in your chat, how long do you think how long do you think it take for you to research the scope and scope this project?
I'm reading the messages here. Probably less than 30 days, more than 30 days. And I see an interesting pattern, like people are seeing like from AI with using AI and without using AI. Okay, mostly 30 days is what I see. How would we know which sources are valid? Interesting question. Okay, with AI less than a week. Now I'll just tell my process. I mean, if there was no AI, traditionally, me following the process of like whatever I have learned till now, so researching about what it is and then defining what is the scope and all, for me, it would have taken 90 days. Not only just scoping of it, but to execute the whole prototype. So again, on this, there would be like multiple skills which would be required, and I would be potentially using back then like Figma or FigJam for essentially like mapping out everything, journey maps or everything, and then design for creating it and sharing across those things with other stakeholders on PPTs or docs. So then couple of years ago, ChatGPT got released and we got LLMs to accelerate our workflows. And there were so many posts across LinkedIn or even social media that we could use those prompts and then get our flows accelerated. And I think most of you have mentioned the same thing. With AI, it would be fast tracked. And if I look at the same problem statement, there are few tools which I just modify in my process, like researching and scoping it out. I could use ChatGPT and AI system. And then still after that, I use Figma and PPT and everything to actually get it done. Now, if we notice, skills have upgraded a little bit. They are the same, but we are using a model or a prompting or these techniques to actually get that outcome done. And if you look at it, the comparison is like now we can do the same task in 40 days. So it's essentially 55% less, right? So then what I thought is like a few months ago. So there was an interesting thing where going on like, what if we could train the system, an AI system, to understand what is our process and actually get it more faster. So that's where I looked at like one of the system and I have trained a certain system in it. So this is again Claude, where I took some time to understand how I was doing earlier, essentially building products and all, and scoping it out how different components work together, and have arrived at certain processes. So along like the domain expertise, and then over the time, what skills I have acquired through this master degree, and with that, I have created certain instructions around it. And with that instructions, I was able to train the AI to follow how I think and execute what I think. So, and this training took me about 6 days to actually arrive with from an idea and then execute everything. So I have that system ready here. I'll just open that system and I'll give the same prompt. So whatever we have seen there, this is this thing, the challenge, I'll just give it again to the system. So if you look at it, here are my instructions. I have broken down my process into 10-step process. And now I just the command like execute or build this dashboard. So what essentially AI system is doing is like it's understanding, it's triggering out like what process I have instructed it. And it's actually building on that problem statement. Like it's reflecting on what is the problem statement. It's reading the whole pipeline, what instructions are, and it will start executing. So it would take some time, but I also want to show like what this process or this whole tool help me build. So now it is running the pipeline. If you look at it, so step one is whatever the process I have done. So it's about domain and everything. So meantime, once this does, I actually did the same thing couple of times. So if you look at it, this is a dashboard which has been generated about like 8 minutes. So if I break down the problem again, Prasad, you have mentioned like what are the things and all, you have read it out. So if we read the same thing, if we just go back, so there are certain things certain users would be using. So if this person is a war analyst and he is actually looking at like what is the next move. So there are certain tasks that certain users have. There are multiple people like war analyst and then probably a policy maker who is sitting in a government who wants to build some policies and then modify accordingly to save that economy. Right? There are different people who are acting upon in this whole problem statement. Then there is an intelligence director who will plan, whereas if a military person is placed around in certain area, so that person also wants to look at like how areas are looking. So this is exactly like what it is. So if you look at right now on overview, there is a theater status of different where there are conflicts and what is happening. There's also a feed which is coming in from different sources, like we mentioned, like from satellite, social media, and all, right. So there are different sources which are coming, and we are looking at like what are the sources that are there. Then there is a whole theater where we are looking at tracking all the areas, like from perspective of like what is happening there and what is the possibility of escalation and what next steps this person has to use. And also there is also progression thing, how this escalation is happening overall. And if you remember, like supply chain was one of the key things. So supply chain, how different trade routes affect. And this is not only the one thing. So every time we look at it, the system can understand those details and then create it. So there were other versions of it, how different systems were there. But interestingly, we have also looked at, me and Prasad have also looked at like, what if we could see what are the satellites around the globe and then track those satellites based on this view. So there is an interesting globe view. We can actually interact with the globe and see what are the satellites which are there and click on it and then actually see what time this satellite comes into here, what is this, how many total passes. So there are critical details which we can track around. Again, these are like made from the open sources where we can extract and then build around it. And there are other details. So there are different variations of the same thing. So if we try to look at this one, this is an interesting thing where I came up with like right now we have seen based on conflicts, there are triggers which are happening in different trades and companies. So if you look at if something happens at one point, so what is the first order effect? What is the second order effect which would happen? Let's say if oil prices have gone up, so what happens to production lines or what happens to everything? We can track it. So it's again an idea which we can execute and any dashboard which can be built on this system. There is also EV tracking which we can do. So it's a more simpler problem statements, right? So let's look at like what is happening right now. It's actually building a system. So again, this would take around 10 minutes. So what I want to understand is like we right now the system has done till 9 steps. So if we just anchor back, so there are screens, what are the process which have educated it. So it's able to understand, it's able to prioritize what the details should go into those screens and how those experiences should look like. Right. So let's wait a couple of minutes, but that's what it is. It's a ballpark is like 10 minutes. You can get a decent prototype, workable prototype. So if we just look at it from the demo perspective, so I have taken 6 days to build it, and now it's taking almost 10 minutes to execute. Now, if we notice here, I haven't used the tools which I was using previously. Like I just stuck to this prototype and I'm getting a code which is JavaScript. And essentially what has happened is like my pre-trained model is where, and my analysis of what it is producing and creating it for the first cut is what I'm observing and then reflecting upon it. Now I didn't use Figma here. I just use Claude and I just document them around like what are my design decisions on PPTs and share across. So what has happened again, my whole thinking process is still compressed. So what we used to take almost like 90 days, now it's taking 6 days and 10 minutes. Now it's not just 6 days every time, but it's 10 minutes every time when I want to execute any of the problem statement, which is essentially 93% less. So now there was a curious thought about it. So if I have to work on like these projects, like different projects would be coming in, and if I have to train, so this is probably like doing end to end. But I had a curious question: should I actually train a system whenever a new project comes to me, right? Which would take 6 days to train. So when I looked at that thing, I tried to look at from a systems perspective, like what should I do and what could I do. That's where I found out that if I have to build a dashboard, again, this is where I'm analyzing critically. Like if I just anchor back to the problem statement, we have decoded. There are multiple users, there are multiple things they need to source from, and there are multiple goals which are there. So if I just break them down, so that's where I found out that there are fundamentally some structural variables like functional types, where if you look at it from user perspective, one user who is analyst is looking at what details and what patterns to identify. That's a functional type is about analytics. And this industry domain is about, again, open source intelligence, which we want to build. And there are certain user goals. Again, from analyst perspective, there is different goals. And from on-site person who is there to strategically plan, there are different goals. So if I break that down, so these are the four fundamental things and a business problem which we are solving. And all of those are like in numbers, like functional types, there are 4 and industry domains are 10. User goals are 5 and business goals. Like that is a base thing which I identified like there would be possibilities of 2,400 different variations of dashboards. Now that interestingly changes with other dimensions like design influence and dimensions, which I discussed again, like user roles, how frequently this data should upgrade, the interactivity layer, and the what platform we are using, whether it is web or mobile or common. And if you look at like the other next step of things like company stage, if it is a startup or if it is an enterprise, so there are other models like business models, if it is a SaaS-based application, or if it is essentially like just a I mean, not software as a service, but additionally other models. So almost like there are 3,45,600 variations of dashboards which are possible, and it's an infinite system, not like a finite system, not like an infinite system. So what I did was like, let's look at it. Yeah, it has built a prototype again, which right now. So look at it. It's more like there is an escalation alert which is happening, and there is an overview. There are all theaters which I can select if it is Ukraine or anything, and which was done decently under 10 minutes. Now, based on my instinct of like, should I train it or not? So what I did was like, what can I simplify around in this process? So that's where I learned the agentic system. And what I did was like, what can agents do where I do certain things from my processes and get more acceleration from it? And what I did was like, I divided the whole workflow into 4 phases where it's a similar thing: understand, architect it, design, and build. There are few agents which are working around multi-agent system. Now, what I did was like, I took my existing, whatever the earlier AI 1.0 system, and then build upon it. Now, that took me 4 days, where I took, again, as I explained, systems thinking and agentic architecture, and then also followed few agentic patterns of when to do it. Now let's look at like another demo, what is possible with it. So I have again pre-coded like what different users are here. And if I just click on it, like if it is an analyst, so I can start generating that dashboard right now. And here is where like my agent, which is architected here, and it's running right now. Meantime, that generates, it would take some time. It generates it. So here are certain generations which are already there, like certain things. So here it's an analyst who is looking at overall all the data, where we see there are raw signals which are being tracked, active sources, and everything. There are KPIs, there are action items, and also how the heat map works. This is for this person. Whereas if we look at from another person where they are on ground and tracking what are the different locations, this is also where there is a live feed and also an anomaly detection map where the triggers are being there. And there is also a prediction engine where like what is happening and what could be done, what could happen next. Not only this, as I mentioned earlier, like there is also a policy advisor who is looking at different goals with like, okay, what should this person do? What policy from a government perspective should be modified or enhanced based on the current situation, tracking and then acting upon it. Whereas from an overview of intelligence director, if one person is looking at it, he just looks at different data like, okay, what should be the next step? And what should I know such that I can answer to different people around it? So these were certain things which were all done under 2 minutes. So right now, whatever I have triggered, now we can open and see like what it has been giving out. Again, this is a similar thing from analyst perspective, and it has given me a similar kind of dashboard. So fundamentally, what is happening is like these agents help me. These multiple agents help me fast track my process even more faster. So from that perspective, if we look at it, from the traditional UX process to right now AI 2.0, it took me 4 days to configure, and there are much more advanced concepts in agents, and we can create more frameworks around it. But for now, for this use case, it took me 4 days and 2 minutes to create just one prototype. So that means like it is 95% less time. And what that also means is like I'm getting more time to innovate or think about am I solving the right problem or not, and iterate upon it. But if you look at, is this good? Is this dashboards, whatever it has been created, are they good? Actually, no. So there are certain problems. If I look at the same thing, so on an overview, if this person is an analyst, so feed shows new events and all, but what should I take over? So I should be able to triage those data points and get some insights. So that goal is not being achieved. Still, I can innovate upon it. Then there is another problem, which is like anomalies which are there. Yes, they are there. It's just representing, but what to do from it. Then there is also source trust, where like if you look at the source reliability matrix, it's giving me huge percentages and all. But really, is it scalable? No. And also like if you look at the first pattern which is there on the dashboard, it's like filters pattern. Does that really work? No, because it doesn't actually add value to whatever my goal is. So there is scope of improvement where like I am just improving upon my skills, using my skills and improving on a decent approach which is there. And now I know which approach doesn't work and which works, because with experience I can analyze it and critique it. So we have also looked at like similar kind of problem again in our master degree, where the scale of the problem is same. We had to again design for a pathogen data sharing platform. So where we have to solve for accelerating virologist workflows. If you are interested, I think there is a link that will be shared right now, and the YouTube series is out. You can look at it. Now, what does this whole process mean? What does this mean? Prasad, your thoughts, you can take over.
Thanks, Bhaskar. So if you could go on to the next slide. it's important to understand that there are two fundamental shifts that are happening. And again, I can see the thought process, or I can imagine the thought process that all of you are feeling right now, which is, okay, so we took a design that would take us 90 days to do, and then we demonstrated that it could be done in about 2 minutes. So what does it mean for me as my career? What is my role? And I want to kind of break it down into a couple of things. Okay. Let's look at the design effort. So earlier, what used to happen is to get a product from 0 to 80 was all our hard work. As a designer, you would be working to kind of design all these different elements and take a lot of time. That was what the 90 days was. Once you did that, then you would iterate it with your colleagues, with your, get feedback, get tested, do all of that stuff. So there's that iteration element that is happening, which is what is helping the product go from 80 to 90. And once you do that, that's when you launch it. And from 90 to 100, you're launching and fixing it. Okay? Now flip it to today. If you're going to be able to get from 0 to 70 with AI, okay, you don't really necessarily need to do a lot of work. So your effort has shifted from the 0 to 80. All of it has shifted from that to the 70 to 90. So you are now focusing on the part which is, okay, the AI has designed it. Now let me critique it. Just like Bhaskar did. He looked at the design and he said, okay, does this design work for me or not? Well, certain elements work, certain elements do not work. What does not work and how do I improve it? So that's exactly what Bhaskar was doing here. So he was able to develop the screen up to 70, very quickly critique it, and then now apply his designer's hat and then start fixing those designs. So that's what he came from the 70 to 90 perspective, right? And finally, when the 90 to 100 is, once you launch it, you're able to do it. Now, this is from a design effort perspective. What do you think happens from a timeline perspective? So let's go on to the next slide. Right? So earlier, if you're thinking about the 90-day schedule, you're talking about there is design that happens, and then, for every designer, there are at least 10 engineers. The ideal is, 1:5, but in the real world, it's like, much, much more different. So you have one designer, you probably have a bunch of engineers working together, and there is a launch, and then there's fix and iterate, and you're talking 90 days to launch, and then about 150 days to kind of figure out, it's almost about half a year to do all of this. Right? Now, when you're looking at it from the new model, you're already designing and engineering within the first 20 days. Right? And as soon as you're completing it, now you're shipping it, and there's a lot more focus on fixing and iterating. Okay. And so the timeline to launch has significantly scrunched up. Right? It's gone from 90 days to maybe less than 20 days. So when the timelines are tighter and where we are involved is different, what else changes? Let's go on to the next couple of slides. So this is one of those things that you need to think about, right? The fundamental thing that we all are familiar with is the double diamond process. We talk about there's research, the design, build, test, ship, and then you go back and forth. Well, does a double diamond process work in a 20-day cycle? Probably not. Those methodologies are correct, but that process is not going to survive the time pressure that we're going to be put under. So what really needs to happen is you're actually going back and forth, like rather than say research, design, build, research is very tight, and you're jumping directly into build, and then you're designing. Once you do that, then you're validating and designing it. So it's changed from the whole design, build, test process to kind of say, let's build it. Now let's fix it. Let's critique it. Let's evaluate it, and let's kind of evolve from there. And so the double diamond process, the methodology is the same. So we have to be a lot more nimble and smart in terms of figuring out which methodology to do where. But the focus is now first build it, and then let's kind of go from there. And again, understand that the cost of building was the reason why the double diamond existed in the initial part. Now we don't have to worry about the cost because you can do it really, really fast. And if you want to modify it, you can modify it with a simple prompt. Right? Let's go on to the next slide. So this is interesting because earlier, when you used to have product designers, engineers, and product managers, everybody working together, the overlaps were not this much, right? There's fairly, spread out, and then there was designers came in with their specific knowledge, product managers came in with their specific knowledge, engineers came in. Now, when you saw this, what is interesting is Bhaskar was completely able to bypass the design component, the Figma tools, and go directly into code, right? Now, I would suspect that he would probably take screenshots of all of this, move it back to Figma, and make his modifications if he had to fix it and then kind of evolve from there. But still, the need for Figma or design tools as such has kind of reduced to the point of saying it's a refinement tool. It's not a 0 to 80 tool, right? So it's a 70 to 90 tool. So when you think about it from that perspective, now all of a sudden design and product management and engineering is no longer the space of individuals. Whereas everybody, it's a lot more democratic, where everybody is looking into every other aspect and collaborating much more closely, right? And so this is where I think you need to think about as a designer. We are no longer designers, we are solving problems because our focus is on evaluating what was given to us, deciding what needs to be done, and prioritizing and fixing the designs. And so the modality has become from the perspective of an individual contributor who's doing all the work to maybe like a design lead where or a design manager where your individual contributor is doing the initial cut of the design and you're critiquing it and telling them how to move forward. And so that is where the new role is going to be, is it's going to be a lot more overlaps. We have to be a lot more comfortable with knowledge and expertise coming from different spaces and incorporating it within our workflows. If we go on to the next slide, right? Now, this is another interesting thing. It's not just something that, Bhaskar and I sat down and we said, okay, this is how it is. Well, turns out this is exactly what we are seeing in the industry, right? Now, this is again, Jenny from Anthropic basically said, yeah, our mock-up time dropped from 60 to 70% to 30 to 40%. So people, and notice she said the word mock-up, right? And again, it's not about, doing the designs or whatever. She's just saying, I'm going to get to the mocks. I'm going to get to the prototypes and I'm going to be able to move much faster. So even the expectation of what we are going to deliver has moved up from a Figma file to something that is clickable and movable and, is interactive. The same thing that you see within LinkedIn, they're doing what LinkedIn is saying for software. We are seeing exactly the same dynamic happen within design, right? So overall, what you've seen here in this session is going to be a lot more common. And one other thing to keep in mind is companies have also realized they've become a lot more savvy from the perspective of, listen, hey, if you're good, you could be anywhere in the world. I should be able to hire people anywhere in the world. So the world of traveling to a different country, getting a visa and working there has changed because you can work remotely and companies are no longer constrained by where they hire the talent as long as they can find the talent. So that is the positive because now our opportunities as designers have also globalized. We've also, if we are able to hit certain standards, then our opportunities to work with companies anywhere in the world are limitless. And so that is what I want you to think is, yes, the scale has changed. The process that designers work in has changed. And it's also the opportunities that we're going to get has also changed. If we go on to the next slide, please. And so when we are thinking about what are the skills that we need to develop, like tell me specifically, Prasad, what are the skills I need to do? Number one, right? You need to really think about evaluating. How do you evaluate? What is your framework for evaluating a design and critiquing that design? So learning to critique a design is absolutely critical. Otherwise, imagine if whatever screens that Bhaskar generated, if you just took them and submitted and did that, would it work? No, right? You still need to have that evaluation phase that is there. So the evaluation part is important. The second part is managing. Think about how are you managing your tasks? So think about well, I'm also thinking, what are my steps? Which step goes first? Which step goes second? What is the output I'm expecting at each of the steps? How am I coordinating with people in my team, the engineers, the product managers? How are we defining the requirements? How are we collaborating together? All of this comes under managing, right? And so it's not just working with the system, but we are also working very closely with people in other disciplines. And so that is something that we need to think about managing. And finally, is about orchestration. So how do you take a design process, right? And how do you think about it and decompose it so you can have, you can figure out what agents are doing what kind of work and who's giving what kind of output, where the errors can happen, and how do you orchestrate this system to get the output that you want. And the truth is, even from the multi-agent system that Bhaskar has shown, you know, it works maybe say 7 out of 10 times. Even now, about 3 of the times it will crash and it won't work, and then Bhaskar has to go back in and debug it, right? But the point is, that is the most basic system. They're more resilient systems. So what you need to kind of figure out is how do you create these complex systems and orchestrate all of this so you're able to get to the value. So if you built these 3 skills, the value that you can provide to any organization is insane, right? And that is what we would say is there's design and there is design. The big design, the big D design, and there's a small d design. So let's go on to that aspect, right? So when you're thinking about this, there are 2 types of design thinking, the big D thinking and the small d thinking. The big D thinking is thinking about what is my strategy, what does my system look like, how am I going to automate, what should I automate, what should I not automate, right? Those are the things that is the big D thinking that you have to build, and that is what is going to make you invaluable. The small d thinking is what UI elements should I use? How should I lay out my screen? What elements should I add? Colors, layouts, all of that stuff. That is small d thinking. That is pretty much automated, right? And you can automate. And even for me, like I'm a colorblind guy, I can use this system and say generate 5 variations of colors, and do the same system in 5 layouts, and I can look at it and I can tell which one is better or worse. And so that small d part is a lot more easy. Whereas the big T part has come into focus, and that is where we need to build to kind of continue moving up in our careers. Let's go on to the next slide. And so the question that I keep getting asked is, whether we have our jobs or not, and that's a question that most designers have. Like, after every demo, after every conversation that I have with people, the big question that everybody asks is, okay, what does a designer do then? Am I going to have a job? Is there a career? My point is, it's not that whether you have a career. Absolutely, you have a career. As long as you're doing the big D thinking, you have a career. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, are you going to be the one person that's going to be looking at all of this stuff and going to sit on the side and say, okay, it's going to let the world pass you by? Or are you going to be that person who's going to jump in and say, okay, let me lead the change, let me think through it. And then once you think through it, then you are irreplaceable. You are valuable for any organization that you want to work for. Right? And that is what I would say would be the parting thoughts for here. But I would love to hear your questions and your thoughts on the demo. Is there anything else that we have on this, Bhaskar? All right, thank you. So questions for Bhaskar, or I happy to answer? And you can just type it into the webinar chat, or you can, if you're interested, you can just say, hey, you can
Yeah, I
unmute your
think we can
microphone
open the
and speak.
session. Vijay, can they speak? Are they allowed to speak?
Sure. Yes. Guys, just please raise your hands if you have any questions. They can just raise them. I think they're putting down the questions even in the chat box.
Right.
Santosh has a phenomenal question. I think, I love the way he's phrased it too. He says, what should the UX designer stop doing personally in the next 12 months? And what work becomes non-negotiable?
That's good.
I love how you said like time box it 12 months. Great. Bhaskar, do you want to take a stab at it before I take a stab at it as well?
Yeah, sure. I'm just reading it again. So, if the designer role is shifting from maker to critic and orchestrator, what work should a senior designer stop doing personally in the next 12 months? So what I think is like even when I have been working in the industry, right? So if I look at it, I shifted my thinking process to like whether if it is solving the problem rather than just thinking about like what screen element should I use. So this change, I have been doing it for like couple of months. So whenever I approach a problem, so it's not about like what screens, what Figma, what design system. Just not thinking about it and thinking about what are the variables involved in it. So let's say if it is a banking application, so how are security systems there? How are authentication systems there? How do they work? What would be the edge cases or error cases that are possible? And then finally arriving at like what it is, how the systems are. And that's first step. And then if these are already known to me, then how I would articulate those experiences and build it out. And then iterate upon it. So that's what I think we should be doing right now rather than just working on like what are I mean I also wanted to highlight that competitive analysis part, which will become like not at all relevant because we are solving problems. Because as Prasad, you would mention the same thing. If we analyze a competitor, we just get to that level. But if we have some frameworks, our frameworks to solve problem, we would be building or innovating above that competitor.
Thank you, Bhaskar. So we have Saurabh, who's also an instructor in the MDes program. He's also worked in the industry for a number of years before he decided his calling was to teach. Saurabh, you have a perspective on this?
Uh, Prasad, are you still talking about what should we stop doing personally?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
No, I love this question because it's just so like meaty, and it's also immediate action that we need to think. So I want to make sure we give it the justice that I think Santosh has spent thinking about it.
Right. So my answer will also be like stop creating, start critiquing. Right? Creation is what is automated. Even if you would create, it will be like 100% quality, let us say in initial rounds. But if an AI does that, it's 90% quality, you can still refine it for that 10%. That will take you much lesser time than what you will take to do it 100% manually. Right? So that's a short answer. If you get through that, then you can again take care of how do you strategize your workflow and everything else. But my message is that stop creating, start critiquing.
And
Yeah.
I think that's, from my perspective, I would actually make it a little bit more granular from that context, right? I still see questions here. It's like, hey, what AI tool should I use? What stuff? And obviously, those AI tools are important. But I think the question is, how do I become a better critiquer, right? Now, there are huge bodies of knowledge that are available out there. So, for example, you have design systems uh, that are talking about it. You have agentic patterns that you need to think about. There are there's a website called UI Patterns, I believe that's the name of the website, where there's a lot of research that other designers have done, where they've taken existing design patterns and critiqued it. They talk about what is good, what is bad. So I think the core skill that you should be asking, there are a couple of things, right? Why am I being given the task I've been given? No matter for the next 12 months, all you do is ask the question why. What problem am I solving? Right? If you can answer that before you even put the pen to the paper, that is a big deal, right? Then you say, okay, if I'm solving this problem, how do I know it is a big enough problem? Right? Ask that question next. Then you say, how am I going to solve this problem? What is my strategy? So define that strategy in your head, right? And then once you solve the problem, ask yourself the question, how do I know that the problem is solved? Right? It's a four-step process. If you are asking each one of these questions to yourself on every project that you're asking, it fundamentally changes your mindset in terms of how you're approaching design, right? Now, the second thing that you need to think is you cannot say you're successful based on the number of hours you've spent in doing the work, right? In fact, there's also another interesting research that says, hey, with AI, people are even more exhausted. Okay. Well, why are people more exhausted? Because we are measuring ourselves by the number of screens we are creating. So it says, oh, if I'm spending 8 hours and I'm spending 2 minutes creating one screen, then basically in 8 hours I need to create like 1,000 screens. No, that's not the point, right? The point is you have created a screen in two minutes, but now this is where your creativity and your ability is coming. Like, how are you helping the organization achieve its outcomes? Okay. If you are holding yourself accountable to the outcomes, then you are giving yourself the permission to say, okay, 2 minutes, I'm going to generate the screen and I'm going to spend the next one day thinking about how to fix this screen and make it really, really good. Right. And so we need to move from what do you call the artifact-based mindset of how many artifacts am I creating to what is the outcome I'm generating for my organization, right? And if you are able to shift that mindset, then fundamentally everything changes for you. Right? And that is what I would say is the next 12 months. And in fact, for all of our students, that is exactly the thing that we try to push is that mindset of don't think about screens, think about the outcomes that you're delivering, right? Now, would love to see the automation agentic workflows. And again, this is an anonymous person who's kind of pointed that. And my argument is, okay, you can see this workflow. Okay. This is the simplest workflow that Bhaskar has created that will kind of do some kind of an okay kind of job, right? What I would challenge you to do is don't think about this workflow. Think about learning about agentic patterns. Just like you have design patterns, you have a concept called agentic patterns. Okay. Think about how these agents collaborate with each other, right? So what Bhaskar did was a very simple agentic pattern where it was a linear process. Okay. The output of one became the input of the other. Well, you could also create an agentic pattern where you have two agents that were fighting with each other to create a solution, right? You could also create a pattern where after every step you have another agent that's actually doing a verification to make sure that something is correct or not, and it's got verification rules. So what I want you to think about is don't just think about, one pattern that you saw in this class, but think about the larger perspective of how many ways can I solve this system in a way that is reliable and consistent. Right? Bhaskar, do you have any other opinions on that question?
No, I think you answered it right, Prasad. So essentially, this is just like a second or third version of like whatever I've identified. But I also figured out like there are expansion to it where I can use other agentic patterns to create more reliable solutions.
Thanks, Bhaskar. So we have another question, and I think, if AI accelerates exploration and execution, how do we ensure that designers don't lose their voice in decision making and just become a validator of AI outputs? I mean, good question. Pooja is a really good question. So, Bhaskar, do you want to take that on?
Yes. So if I break down that question, like AI accelerates exploration and execution, it's accelerating based on our process, which we have trained upon it. That means it should, I mean, theoretically, it should give that explorations very decent way with minor deviations, right? Because it's our process. But if we over rely on AI, so that's where we could go haywire around like getting other different solutions. But again, if we do it ourselves or we do it using AI, again, based on our training, we are the people who are responsible to communicate the decision. So communication component is still with us as humans. So whenever we talk about our designs and we talk about with our stakeholders, we are expressing that this works because of this thing, of this reason. And this is the right thing because users would face this. So we are still the voice. We are just critiquing what AI is there. We are improvising on it and then communicating it. So I don't think we are losing the voice or decision making there. We are controlling it, but we are accelerating what we are doing previously.
And I'd like to take a slightly uh, different. Saurabh, you have something.
Yeah, I have a very interesting analogy to answer this question. When we work in design teams, right, there are interaction designers, visual designers, they do the tool work, correct? They do the exploration and creation. Then there is a lead who makes a decision whether to approve that design or not, right? Now that lead is there because they have the decision-making skills, they have that critical thinking skills, right? So what is automated is that the person who is doing exploration and execution, not the decision maker, right? And the whole setup is being done much faster, right? So decision taking abilities, as long as users are humans, it's not going to go away, right? Because the speed to execute and explore is now faster, but the human limitations are still uh, what it was like from thousands years, right? You still have the same speed of reading that you had like 10 years ago or 100 years ago, right? So decision making skills and decision making power is not going anywhere else. It's just that your workflow is getting fast tracks. That's it. Yeah.
And I would actually give a little bit of a twist on what Bhaskar has also said and what you have said, right? I'm going to merge both of this and give a slight twist. Let's talk about when you're working with your company. So if you want to have a voice when you're talking to your within your organization, okay, where are all the points, touch points where you're talking? The first part is when you're defining the requirements. Okay. Now, if this process is yours, now if you've taken somebody else's process, somebody else's agentic system, you will have no idea what is going to happen. But if this process is yours, you understand how these agents are collaborating or what the instructions are in the backend, then you know what input is required, right? So when you're sitting with the team and defining the requirements or you're setting up, you are actually taking all of those requirements and you are asking the correct questions when those requirements are being defined. Okay. Now, interestingly, I had one designer who says, Prasad, let me just take the requirements that have been given in my company and feed it into the system. They did that. Okay. And when they did that, came out with an answer that was absolutely wrong. They said, why? Because the requirements were all wrong. The requirements were also being generated using ChatGPT or whatever AI was there. And so they're all wrong. They're not prioritized. And now when you take a non-prioritized list of requirements and you're giving it to the next system, it's garbage in, garbage out. So what this person had to do was he had to spend a lot of time looking at the requirements and fixing all those requirements before they even fed it in. And so that is one place where you have a very strong voice. Okay. The second thing is once you do the system, you don't really have to talk about it, right? Just think about how Bhaskar talked about it. It's like, okay, here's the screen, but here are 5, 6 areas where the design failed. And these are the problems that we need to solve. And these problems are not something that the AI can solve. So you need to be able to articulate the problems that you've identified. If you cannot say these are the problems I found, then how will somebody know what your value in that process is? And so you need to be able to articulate the problems you solved and why those are problems. All right. And then once you solve all of them, then you articulate how this design that you have created in collaboration with an AI is now supporting the organizational's goals, the outcome, right? How is this driving the outcome? And as long as you can do these 3 parts, you have a seat at the table. In fact, you are the person who's got probably one of the most important seats at the table because you're now thinking end to end about the whole process. And I think this kind of goes in with the next question as well, which is you said creating is green and taking, just taking, okay, I think creating is, I'm assuming you mean that creating is easy and taking one day thinking about it. The manager and the seniors will ask if if you're taking so long to do it with an AI, then everybody's expecting you to create 10 screens a day. Yes, the that is the natural tendency for managers, and that is where you have to have that discussion like, okay, here's a screen I've created with AI in 2 minutes, but here are all the problems. These are the problems I have to solve manually. And that is the expectation you need to set. So every time you see the design, you get a design, you need to be able to critique it. And then you need to be able to say, this is what I'm going to do to solve it over the next part of the day. And that, as long as you're communicating it and the other person sees, yeah, that's a problem that is really there, they will agree with you. All right, let's see. So there's an anonymous question that says, from a UX and product perspective, how does the organization decide when to integrate AI like Claude versus relying on internal platforms? So I know, Bhaskar, you guys have had a lot of discussion within your organization about confidentiality and stuff like that. Do you want to take a stab at this?
Yeah, so I mean, at least I have been facing the same issue where which uh, AI system would work and all. So again, it comes to organizational goals, which I think where they want to make it happen, because right now, how they look at Claude as a system is because it creates code very perfectly rather than like a design ideating partner. So the perspectives will be different in different organizations, and we have to deal with it. So we have been restricted with different set of systems where we could use, but also we have been using it like in a different, slightly different way where we are not violating the confidentiality. We have to look at those violations of confidentiality by companies and then act upon it. So I mean, what I have been doing is like pushing to get those things, because proving it out with POCs and all, and I think it's going on in those lines. So it depends on like how organizational leaders are looking at that systems.
And I think some organizations are going to be, again, if you look, for example, talk about a financial organization like JP Morgan Chase or some other big company, banking system, they do not want their customer information to be shared with ChatGPT or Claude or whoever, right? So there are strict firewalls, and it's a fireable offense for using AI tools. So there are policies for privacy and confidentiality that are there that most organizations will have, that you need to be sensitive to. And but at the same time, organizations are also um, providing tools, in-house AI tools that can solve the problem. So it's an opportunity to kind of have those conversations within your leadership. In fact, every design leader has a mandate that you have to use X amount of tokens of AI, right? It's interesting. And now today the argument is, just because you're using tokens doesn't mean you're a good employee, and that is what the argument is. And this nature is changing, but you will have tools that will be available, especially for most organizations. It's a no-brainer today to say we are going to buy AI or build an in-house system or whatever to support you, and that is going to be a natural thing. It is given, it's happening, right? If it hasn't already, it will happen as soon, soon. So yeah, so there's another question that says, in this AI era, do we need to go for field survey to get qualitative data for user research, right? And this is my personal space, so if I could take this, Bhaskar, right? Um, One of the things, and I had this very interesting discussion that I'm having currently, where I have to approve a website. Okay. Now, this other partner is coming in and bringing their website and saying, okay, we need to approve it. Okay. And I am saying, using my experience and all the research that I've done in the past, I'm saying, well, look at problem A, problem B, problem C, problem D. Like, you need to restructure the information. This information needs to be here. This information is not here. And it's becoming a very lengthy discussion process. And I just, yesterday, out of just, frustration, I said, okay, let me give it to Claude. And I said, these are my goals. This is the intention. Here are the resources. I want you to look at, these website resources and tell me exactly what are the gold standards for creating a website or for this intention. Done. In about 30 seconds, it got it done. Then I said, here's the URL. Now, using these best practices, now, and I also said using search logs and query logs and all that, prioritize all of the intentions that my customers will have when they come to this website. So the system went out, looked at query logs and all of that stuff, and came up with a list of all the intentions that the customer will have when they come to the website. Then I said, now analyze this website with relation to those intentions. It analyzed, identified all the weaknesses. Then I said, now redesign the screen and restructure the content in the website to the new intentions to make sure that all the intentions are met. Done. It took me about 45 minutes, completely revamped it rather than constantly go back and forth giving feedback, and all that got done. So the argument I'm trying to make is this. Their UX has become a very sophisticated science today. There is a huge body of knowledge. So the first question that you need to ask is this: is there knowledge that is already available? Right? If the knowledge is not available, by all means, do the research, because that is important. Okay. But if you do research for knowledge that is already existing, you can be guaranteed that your partners will probably do the same searches on Claude and say, this data is already available. Why are you wasting my time doing it all over again? Okay. So realize that, your partners have access to Claude or other AI LLMs that can then go out and do all the secondary research and bring it in. And so make sure that whatever questions you want to do research for, there's no answers out there. And so you are genuinely spending the time to get that data. Yeah. If you are repeating the work, your partners will question you whether you know what you're doing. So be very careful about that, given the way that AI is democratizing knowledge. Okay. I hope that answers the question, Preetham. Now, this is interesting, Preet. If AI can simulate user personas and predict behavior, do you think traditional user research will become obsolete, or is there something fundamentally replaceable about human insights? Bhaskar, you want to take a stab at this?
I'm just looking at that question. It's in
the chat. It's in the chat. It's
Yeah.
not in the question and answers.
If AI, so there was one more question, but yeah, if AI can stimulate user personas and predict behavior, do you think traditional user research will become obsolete, or is there fundamentally? Okay, so what I think is, again, creating user personas and predicting behavior is, again, we are trying to reduce the risk for what we are trying to build. Now, if I break that down again, so if it is a website or if it is a dashboard or if it is what is the thing that we are building for, if we break down again, there would be finite number of details or decisions that users would be making in that ecosystem given in the problem space. So whatever we want to take decisions will be readily available is what I believe. And we can get to that level. And Prasad, as you mentioned that whatever we want to clarify and get more clarity on taking a decision, that's only where the research would happen. And that's only where we need to reach out to those specific users and understand to take a clarity on it. So it doesn't fundamentally replace the human insights. It just helps us to get to the more deeper level of why and how to frame that insight and to actually convert that insight into an actionable outcome on the product.
Now, here's my thought. Okay. Did you behave, or like, did your parents, when they were using the internet, did they behave the same way? Like, or maybe let me ask a different question. Take a website, observe your parents using the website. Okay. Would you use the same website the same way? The answer is probably not, right? And the reason is because we are learning and evolving systems. Humans learn and evolve and change our behaviors, right? And so when you get a system and when you're given a certain stimuli, you will behave in a certain way, right? until you learn that doing a different behavior is better. Right? Now, what AI is doing is it is simulating user personas and predicting behavior based on the past. It is not able to predict the evolution of behavior, right? How are you evolving after you use a system? For example, ChatGPT or whatever AI is there, right? So there was one way that you used it when you started asking questions and you started using the tool. But as you got more experience and more, you started behaving differently. Right? And so the argument that is there is you want to understand that AI can simulate what it knows. It cannot simulate what is going to happen in the future. So that still means that research is very, very relevant, right? But you have to be very sure what you're researching, right? And as you kind of get that data, now how do you incorporate that into your product? So those are the things that you need to think about. So research by no means, or I should say, research continues to be an extremely valuable tool, right? It is going to be a critical aspect of your product success. However, it is up to you to decide when to use research and how to use research to get the right augmentation for your AI tool. Right. Now, there is one question that is, what are your thoughts on Codex? And I've never used Codex. I've seen it being used. Have you used Codex, Bhaskar?
I don't think, no, because
Okay.
whatever the tasks are there, it's getting done. So exploring a new tool for a different thing is where it makes sense. But what I'm seeing even on social media is that it builds out. It's nothing but MCP with Claude itself. So the system is already there. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. So I would say, and again, this is something that, we tell our students at the beginning of their course, when they start their MDes program, we tell them like, okay, all the tools that you're using today, assume that those tools are going to be, you're not going to use them by the time you get done with your master's degree program. Because the landscape is evolving so fast. In fact, when we did the first cohort, ChatGPT was the one that was the big deal. Right? Today, we are talking Claude. Okay, and the cohort has graduated and we're talking Claude, right? So when first cohort, we were still thinking about teaching Figma. Today, we are thinking like, should we even teach Figma? Okay. So the idea is don't get attached to a tool. Okay. Get attached to what the tool can do for you. And if some other tool can solve that problem better, change. Be flexible. And I think from our perspectives as designers, because there's a lot of reasoning and there's a lot of additional, pre-work that needs to be done, Claude seems to do the job really well for us at this point, right? And there's a lot of reasoning that can happen there. But again, if Codex is something that will be needed, I think, you incorporate it. That's it. But my argument is think about the task you need to get done and use the appropriate tool. All right. So let's see. So how much time do we have, Professor Venkatesh? You're on mute.
We still have 5 more minutes, Prasad.
5 more minutes. So you can
Yeah.
probably take 1 or 2 more questions.
Yeah.
And, do you have,
I see one question which is interesting. For newly created problem solver role, which background, PM, design, or engineer has the upper hand?
when I went to, and this is the same answer that my business partner would give, is when we went to Harvard, most people the Harvard, when you graduate out of the business school, you go into the product management roles much more, right? And so for both of us, we were designers when we went to Harvard. We went through all the revenue numbers, the models, all of that stuff. And by the time we graduated out of that, we just realized that we are better designers because as designers, we still need to look at the numbers, we still need to predict and stuff like that. So my point is, I don't think it is going to be product managers. I genuinely don't think it's going to be like different roles anymore, right? Teams are getting much smaller, And so it's going to be like problem solver with a specialization in product management, where product management is you are now setting up the timelines, managing the process, the systems, setting up the PRDs, doing all that, right? Whereas you are facing the customer, the product manager is facing the business, and then the engineer is facing the system, right? And so they're different facing roles, but at the end of the day, it is what you can bring to the table. And again, if you have a team of 10 people, you're discussing upper hand and lower hand. But when you're a team of 2 or 3 people, you're just working together as a group. It's a small group where all of us are making and sharing decisions equally. So the point I would argue is it's not what role you have that is going to give you an upper hand. It is your ability to articulate, orchestrate, and prioritize that is going to give you the upper hand. Of the three of the people, whoever has the larger, bigger picture thinking and whoever is able to orchestrate, articulate, and prioritize, those are the people that have the bigger opportunity. All right. So I think done.
There is one interesting
Yeah.
question here.
Okay.
So you
We
can
just
go.
love taking questions. So like we'll take one question and then we'll end the session. But yeah, I mean this is we really enjoying the quality of questions here. Go ahead.
What if I don't get hired just because I am doing designs faster and efficient than 10 people in an organization? In an interview, and the product lead interviewer gets scared.
What do you mean? Can you maybe explain?
So if I'm doing these designs much faster and efficient than other 10 people, would I still get hired? Because that might scare the people who are hiring me that I am performing more faster than them.
Interesting. We did an apprenticeship where one of the companies that participated is this huge, one of the largest event management companies in India. And the founder is a hardcore AI guy. So he basically wanted to create a new venture with just 3 people. Okay. It was him. He hired an engineer and reached out to us and he said, "Hey, do you have a couple of designers available?" I said, "Yeah, we have an apprenticeship program. So if you're interested, you can, and the apprentice is interested and you're interested, you guys like each other, you can work with each other. There's no problem." So they ended up working with these 2 designers. Okay. These designers were thinking, okay, we have to do the research, then we have to do this, we have to do this. So they said, okay, tell us the design brief. So this person gave the design brief to the designers, and then they spent 3 days or 4 days kind of doing the design brief and creating all that stuff. They went back, and then this person had already demoed the system. We'd already built the system 2 days or 3 days later. And they said, oh, okay, this is the design brief. This is what we need to research. Like, okay, go do research. And then, by the time they came back, this guy had already designed the system. A new three versions he had created and he'd shown it. And then, okay, this is the version I'm going. And then they said, we have to do something else. And then by the time they came back, it was already done. So it was very frustrating for the designers because every time they'd go and come back, the process was already changing. The product was already different. So whatever they were doing was irrelevant. And from the perspective of the CEO that was working with these guys, I asked him, like, what did you think? He's like, Prasad, I really don't think we need designers anymore. Right? I did all the work without any design input. So whatever I was doing, these designers were spending more time doing it. So my argument to that question is think about it from the other perspective, right? If you don't do this, and your CEO believes that they can do a better job than you without you, why would they want to hire you? Right? And so and most companies today are shifting their mindset into that. Right? They're no longer saying that, and people who are going to be worried and scared and, whatever, eventually, if not today, tomorrow or day after tomorrow, they're going to be pushed out of the career path. Okay. The people who are capable and who are able to think, and again, it's not just the tools, right? Who are able to do that critical thinking, the big D thinking, your jobs, if not today or tomorrow, maybe today, tomorrow, you will scare people. That is completely natural. But your career path is going to be much more different in the long term than anybody else. And so I would say think long term, don't think short term. Short term, yes, there is a risk. Long term, this is like, the tide. You can't stop the tide. This is going to happen. So I think we are done with this session. So
Sure.
we have some last minute thoughts. Vijay, do you want to take it on?
So, right. So thank you, Professor Prasad, Bhaskar, and Saurabh for an insightful session. Vijay, would you like to talk about the program a little bit?
Sure. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would, instead of program, I would just, give it like an ending note. As we come to the end of today's session, I would like to thank you all for your time and participation. And for those of you who are interested in exploring more about Masters of Design and User Experience program, I would encourage you to visit our website for our detailed information. I've just put down the link on the chat box. And you may also join our WhatsApp group to stay updated and receive any additional support or guidance you may need. Because the webinar is going to be in series. It is not. So the next webinar update will be released soon. Okay. And thank you for your continued support. And I'm looking forward to stay connected with you guys. And thank you, Prasad. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Vijay.
Thanks.
And I would just say join the WhatsApp group because every event, everything, we announce it there. And check out our YouTube channel because that is where the webinar is being posted, which what we did in 9 days with AI, where we're working. I think that was the example that Bhaskar talked about where we're working with the folks in Singapore to solve the genomic database problem with AI. So check it out so you can see really how our journey and our evolution also plays out for us. So we wish you the best of luck and hope to see you the next time, next month. Bye.
Thank you, Bhaskar.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. See you all in the next webinar. Bye.